Hey, my name is Ramirez, and going through my journal, and decided to return to a previous series that I wanted to start, but I don't know why I wanted to start it off with reading with British voice acting at that point in time. Um, so yeah, 25 Rules of Disinformation. Um, Again, these were post, right? Like there was a forum, somebody went out of their way to post a variety of different tactics that occur in disseminating information. The first ones were COINTELPRO, counterintelligence techniques for dissolution, diluting a subject. And these are 25 rules of disinformation. Rule number one, alongside the last six rules, are applicable only to principalities, actors, key players, news anchors, uh, interest groups, lobbyist groups. It requires serious planning and staging. Think tanks, analytic firms. A great example of these things are three specific events: currency wars that happened at the Harvard University and the Kennedy Center, Event 201 that was fairly popular in October of 2019, and Cyber Polygon, which was the thing that is associated with the digital revolution, Charles Schwab, and this whole cryptocurrency thing. So I am only going to read rule number one and the last six rules because they relate to Machiavellian tactics, and I think they're more interesting than everything else. So rule number one: hear no evil, see no evil, speak of no evil. Regardless of what the actor knows, don't discuss it, let alone acknowledge it. Because there is this importance of maintaining a facade amongst your image, your status. If you're a professor, if you're a government official, if you're any of these positions that actually has some credibility, it could give leeway to changing the minds of the masses. A great example of this is Dr. Post Malone. I always bring him up because he owns patents that are related to the mRNA beer related thing, and through that mechanism, it's provable that he knows what he's talking about. He actually owns the patents, but yet the media and a variety of other players want to disacknowledge that aspect of him. So if we go to the last six rules, which should be rule 19, emotionalize, antagonize. No, hold on. Five. Oh yeah, 25. Yeah. I was like, where's 25? 19. Outright mentally ignoring all proof. Right. So if there's evidence presented to you, and you're one of these key players, remember this all relates to principalities, actors, people who get their face put on in front of everyone else. Outright mentally ignoring all proof, as if any and all statements or evidence become irrelevant. Um, will ask for evidence that isn't on hand, even by cops. Right? Regardless, though, well, can you show me evidence for that? Can you show me evidence for that? To either downplay, stall, or, it has its use in a discussion. Will downplay to any evidence, or will downplay or deny any evidence. If it comes from the horse's mouth, deny witnesses, paperwork, statements, even archives. Will always question the relativity of the subject matter. So that's rule 19. Rule 20, falsifying evidence. Whenever possible, introducing new facts, clues, designed and manufactured to conflict with the actual premise. In this case, it's the Epstein, right? They said that he was able to grab his clothes and his bed sheets in order to manhandle himself, ignoring the obvious fact, right? The obvious evidence that he was taller than the bunk bed. The cameras were turned off. The security guards were asleep. So this is an aspect of manufacturing evidence, right? They manufactured the perception that, oops, it just went wrong all of a sudden. he just passed away. Um, but that's just one aspect, right? Because they're trying to sell the idea that he suicided himself. And there are other aspects that, people will make the assumption that he's still alive. Other people will suggest a variety of other theories, but the thing still stands is the fact that there is this level of manufacturing of evidence to point to a certain direction, right? Falsifying a crime scene in a way. Rule 21, calling grand juries. And a perfect example of this is January 6th, as we're seeing it right now. Because in a jury, from what I understand, it has certain mechanisms that it could use to indict, to stop, to ask for paperwork from certain entities that they're stopping. But to read it, it says calling grand juries, special prosecutors, an empowered investigative body. Key is to control the case, control the narrative, and especially if you have the media, a variety of headlines, it can tend to lead to a mass groupthink of them being suggested a thought over the case without knowing any of the actual material fact. Control the case. It benefits the operator or team the effectively and efficiently neutralize sensitive issues before it becomes record, right? Because there is this whole thing that everything in that court case is about to get documented by the person with the little keyboard, you know what I mean? Neutralize sensitive issues before it becomes record. Oh yeah, I already said that. Control evidence and testimony. In one case with Epstein, all right, I'm using this as an example because it's well known, it's documented, it's out in the public. Epstein controlled the lawyer. There was 2 previous cases that were tried to go up against him, and in both instances he controlled the lawyer, or at least he hired that girl's lawyer, and the lawyer would approach them in the guise of, oh no, I'll help you. Testimony, seal records, calling prosecutors, defendants, lawyers can ensure the jury has nothing of relativity, seal all evidence too, right? Because there is an aspect to seal, or what is it, scratch from record? No, there's a word for it. When you can ask that clerk, like, hey, can you strike that from record? Seal evidence. No further investigators can read the documents afterwards. Will play the long game for a favorable outcome. And in playing the long game, that also drains people of resources. The objective is to find the guilty innocent and will find the innocent guilty. And this is a game that they've been playing for quite some time, so... I'd imagine that there are a variety of different law firms that probably have a variety of different strategies to use in trying to get their client out of scenarios, right? There isn't one argument that could just get somebody out of murder, but because each circumstance is different. But I'm pretty sure there are very crafty people who could just find ways to... A great example of this was why we don't have maternity leave. I should wait for the plane. A great example of this is why we don't have maternity leave. The way that it was allowed to be changed was, instead of them saying, instead of having a classification of a pregnant woman, they worded in the document birthing people. So it essentially, because it fit under like some discrimination law because only one party was able to get it. So if they worded it that way, the judge would let it go by. But in reality, the judge, right, that any person should have had the wherewithal to be like, why are you saying birthing people? In reality, it was just a way to do away with maternity leave here in the United States. Okay, Rule 22, manufacturing truth. Expert groups, authors, leaders, influencing existences, or financing them from the very beginning. Sorry, I got really bad handwriting. Those willing to forge new ground and find idealists. So this is why I'm always touting and talking about eugenicists and these scientists, because in reality, they weren't chosen. So if you look into it, you'll eventually find that there was an initial grant that was offered in part by these, I think it was the Carnegies, where they just went around the universities to find students that were well versed in literature, history, and all these other subjects. Um, they picked the best ones. In reality, they just probably had a backroom deal and were like, "Hey, are you willing to play ball with us? Are you willing to cook the books?" Because essentially, they were just trying to shape public education by and large. That was the intended goal. Another aspect of this was the Macy's conference, but that fits other aspects of things. Those willing. Oh yeah, and finding idealist. When looking for an idealist, it's essentially looking for somebody that already has a conclusion in their head and will manipulate the data, the academics, in order for it to fit that realm of thought. Here we have via scientific investigation, social research, statements, testimony, and it's all designed to lean favorability. It's why people have stopped reading, and by and large, and have just started reading the title. Um, Moving on. Rule 23: manufacturing bigger distractions. Now, as much as we like to joke about the idea of how do I say this? It's like, oh no, man, they just did this to distract from this other bigger thing. To some degree, there was an aspect of that because I like bringing up the Sherman Oaks incident that happened here in LA because, you know, like I get it. Some of these incidents are very serious and should be taken very seriously. But I think that's more of a mental health issue than it is taking the rights away of everybody else just because of bad few apples. I think it's more important to address the bad apples than it is to just punish everyone for, you know what I mean? Like, either way, manufacturing bigger distractions. If all options are dwindled for an actor, operator, or teams, resort to focusing on bigger topics, moving the limelight. It's actually a pretty good song. Prevent unwanted media coverage. So, a great example of this was the Amber Heard situation and Ghislaine Maxwell, how they were occurring at the same time. And one got televised. There was no reason to televise Johnny Depp's case. And if you think about it, he probably should have had the money, the status, the people behind him from, what do you call him? Their managers to their producers. Somebody should have been or had the wherewithal to control that aspect of coverage. Yet for whatever reason, none of that happened. In reality, the media and his producers probably all worked alongside him, not alongside him, but whoever they needed to get into that courtroom is probably how it happened. And they were more than willing to throw Amber Heard under the bus. So this goes back to like Devil Bill, people who grow up in fucked up situations, and da 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 da. Speak of nothing you want ignored, forgotten, unseen, such as trails, events, staged or planned operations. So if there are instances where you could prove that, how do I say this? If there's any evidence that would prove that these events were manufactured, they're going to diminish. They're going to quiet down those voices. It's why some of the initial BLM riots, you had bricks, just random bricks were laid out in the middle of the street. Those bricks had no real construction site near them in order for them to be there. Yet, you know what I mean? Like, people will still have the videos, and I'm sure you can find them. But in reality, as a larger topic as a whole, and in the greater discussion of a promoting of a message, that's not going to get out there. The media has no interest in discussing any of this. And because it happened at 2019, a lot of people were actually banned off the internet for even trying to speak or describe the events of how some of these things were manufactured. Because one of the greatest questions that I always wondered, that I remember hearing at some point, was who paid for the signs? Printing isn't cheap. Like, I've been looking into, well, whatever. But printing isn't cheap. Who's printing all these signs and who's making the frameworks for them? Because you'll see videos of U-Hauls show up and people just getting out signs and handing them over to protesters. So it begs to ask the question, who paid for all that? I'm not saying that there aren't people who will actively just, I don't know. It's just weird, is all I'm saying, right? There has to be some level of organization. And I think it's kind of what got Crowder famous at first was him infiltrating Antifa, and like what he essentially discovered was that to some degree they had an app that they were using to communicate with one another, and if you didn't get it from one of them, you didn't get it at all. Unseen events, planned operations, make something bigger or pay for a bigger event, can also plan according to stage handlers, mainstream media, speaking double heads, run cover. And by I wrote double head, but I know what I meant by that. I mean YouTubers, alternative media voices, people who just have a different opinion. No, people who have the, how do I say this? People who have the guise of a hidden opinion. People who, a perfect example of this is Anomaly from YouTube. He was touting conservative ideals. He was claiming he was a Trumpster, but towards the end, right when Trump lost, and everybody already knew that Biden was in office, Anomaly did a full 180, and he completely switched his rhetoric. He went completely against them. He started talking that Zion Dawn rhetoric, which would label Trump as a Zionist. So there were, and he wasn't the only one. There were a variety of other YouTubers. I could just use him as an example because he really doubled down on it, like the moment that he lost. So yeah, Rule 24: silence critics. What is it? List option for operations and teams. Oh yeah. This is one of the last options for operations and teams. And by this is their last option, I mean this is their last option, because if they couldn't get a judge on it, if they couldn't get a warrant, if they couldn't find any other way to press on you, this was kind of their last option. If methods fail, considering removing the target from the cultural circulation and current trend, giving operators and teams some breathing room is important. At this point, it is important they address any issues, topics, ideas, let alone engage in the dialogue. So, to some degree, they will try to create this ambiance of moving away from that trend, trying to push the trend elsewhere. In the last tactics of dilution is sliding the topic, keeping it something similar, something the same. So if like people are talking about 9/11, people or the operators will start posting, was it a direct energy weapon? Was it a dust pulverizer doomsday weapon or some shit, right? They'll come up with some other thing to keep it relevant to the topic, but sliding it slightly to the side. And it's, to tire you out. At this point, any issues? Yeah, let alone discuss in the dialogue. Can be death, arrest, detention, blackmail, destruction of character, destruction of financial destructions, and last but not least, emotional disaster. Like they'll find ways to emotionally press on you, and it's all just to affect your mental state. Like they will find avenues to shake you up. Now, Rule 25, which is the most popular thing when all options are left, vanish. If you hold keys, a custodian of secrets, and you're overly illuminated, leave. Exit stage left. A great example of this is Dianne Feinstein. When was the last time you saw her on television? Dianne Feinstein has completely disappeared off the television, off the news, off of being the face of the Democratic Party. Why is that? Well, largely, if anybody wasn't aware, she had an assistant who, for over 25 years, was essentially harboring a Chinese spy, and we can assume what was occurring on there for 25 years. And what makes this even worse is that during the time of WikiLeaks and during the time of a liberal revolution of WikiLeaks against the government, Julian Assange, no, not Julian Assange, my bad, Edward Snowden, because I've talked about this asshole plenty of times, but Edward Snowden completely gave sponsorship to Dianne Feinstein. We need to trust leaders like Dianne Feinstein who actually want to get to the bottom of these issues. And essentially, his cultural backing essentially gave her the seat that governed over aspects of the intelligence community. But nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody ever will talk about these things. And that was rule 1. Yeah, rule 1 and the last 6 rules, which is rule 19 all the way to rule 25. I don't know if I'll do the next series. I'll figure out when I do it. I have other notes too. But either way, my name is Ramirez, and this was, what time is it? 21 minutes. No, I think that's too much. Either way, my name is Ramirez. I will see you in the next episode.